Beautiful. Thank you guys so much for having me. My name's Wes. I'm a DevRel person from EigenLayer. Really excited to chat with you and also kind of get your feedback about these ideas. Been with EigenLayer for about a year and a half. Prior to EigenLayer, I was at Protocol Labs. And 2010 to 2020, I spent a lot of time in Web 2 in centralized large-scale systems, distributed databases, and public cloud systems like Google Cloud. But in the evening, I was a Ethereum proof of work miner, and I was involved in Bitcoin for some time. So I've always been really passionate about expanding Web3 capabilities beyond just the EVM to off-chain compute capabilities. And ZK is one of the most powerful areas, I think, for enabling that. So EigenLayer is sort of a parallel technology that I think can complement a lot of the work that the smart folks in the ZK community are doing. So we'll get into it. We're going to talk about why people typically build an EigenLayer in the first place, the benefits that EigenLayer community can get from ZK apps, and then sort of the opposite side, the benefit that EigenLayer can provide to ZK builders. We'll talk about some examples of ZK apps that are live on EigenLayer mainnet today, and also our roadmap and how it would complement a lot of the great work that's going on with Noir and the Aztec community. So I wanted to start with a fun quote. I asked GPT to give me a quote about ZK and how it relates to scaling Ethereum. And I think this is probably, I don't know if this is like 2018, 2019 when Vitalik made this comment. But wow, it's definitely became true. And I think what's fun is, ZK traditionally is used very much so for privacy-centric use cases. But I think with EigenLayer combining ZK, it's going to expand to even more use cases, even sometimes public data sets that require proof of computation. So a little bit of background on why build an EigenLayer. This, I think, is probably even maybe a little bit redundant for this community, but for Web3 broadly, it's worth saying that, decentralization is really the value driver. It's the reason that why we're here. A lot of the stuff that we're doing today has been done in Web 2, but doing it in Web 3 in a decentralized way is tremendously impactful. I mean, if you look at the market cap of crypto over a period of time, all of the crypto community, what we're building, these decentralized ledgers and similar technologies, what's special about it is the trustlessness, the privacy aspects of it, and the truly decentralized nature of it. But when you look at a lot of Web3 projects today, they may want to be fully decentralized. They may want to be ZK provable. They may want to be more private. But it's very difficult, and it's very expensive to build things that are decentralized. If you look at popular systems today like social media systems or finance systems or YouTube or anything that we use as consumers, it's very difficult to rebuild those as fully decentralized systems. Some of the challenges that you might come across if you tried to do this is first raising capital. If you're going to rebuild one of these systems in a Web3 decentralized way, if you use proof of stake systems, you're going to need a lot of capital and stake behind it, and that takes time, that takes investment, that takes resources. Then you're going to want to look for people to run your network, preferably like a network of trustless operators and some service you can build that they'll run. But you'll need to recruit those people as well. You need to build maybe a point system or some other mechanism to get your community excited to run your validator or your operator components. This all takes away from the special uniqueness of what you're trying to build, whether it's your decentralized social media app, your ZK email service, whatever that special sauce is, that is very different from the first two components. And previously, there were a lot of really smart folks that were providing solutions for this, like the Cosmos ecosystem, but those systems required you to build them in a way that also required consensus among the nodes. It was app chains, effectively, which is fine, but it's a lot of additional work when you may not necessarily need to maintain a consensus. And so the way that we're phrasing EigenLayer is decentralization as a service. So the goal is to bring the staked assets and the operators automatically as part of the offering, so that you can focus time on your offering for Web3. And then also, there's a variety of staking mechanisms beyond just core Ethereum. You could be staking your token as well. And so if you have a token that's relevant for your community, your DAO, whomever, that can be a part of the crypto economic security and hopefully bring your solution to market faster. So that's the general EigenLayer value prop. The way we go about it is we use the term crypto economic security, which is very similar to Ethereum's approach. It's staked assets, it's validation, it's slashing, and it's rewards, but it is programmatic. It's not purely validating Ethereum blocks, it's validating any type of off-chain service that you can imagine. And the term that we use for those services are autonomous verifiable services. So when you build on EigenLayer, you are effectively building an AVS. It's a standalone service that is validated. It runs off-chain, but it's validated on-chain. And so there's really three entities in the EigenLayer ecosystem. There are restakers, people that bring capital into the ecosystem. Could be retail folks, could be institutional folks. There's a lot of capital out there that wants to participate in these new Web3 services, and they want to earn a yield, or maybe they have a philosophical or emotional alignment with a project. Lots of reasons they want to participate. There's operators, could be anyone. It could be a professional shop, it could be a solo operator, it could be someone in your community who wants to run the service. And the third piece is effectively you. It's the person who is building this service. It's a person who's built a novel way to try to decentralize some back-end component to help realize a use case that they care about. The fourth is ultimately the consumer, the person who's actually going to use this service. And the value flows look like this. You've got staking that flows to the operator. They are delegating their flows as operator. So as a staker, I bring in some ETH, and I choose one operator to delegate it to. And now that operator, when they run a service, that stake is effectively at risk. If the operator runs the service correctly, they'll receive rewards. If they run it incorrectly, they could have that stake slashed, which means the staker effectively would lose a portion of that capital. So it's very similar to the Ethereum core staking mechanism, just generalized beyond block building. So let's talk a little bit about how ZK app builders could benefit from this ecosystem. There's a lot of really smart folks that are building smart ZK apps in the ecosystem. This is a list from the awesome Noir repo as an example. And when you think about these components here, what we would like to do from EigenLayer perspective is take all the goodness of what they're building, this off-chain verifiable compute, and use that as a building block for an AVS, because the AVSs require validation in some component, and these are really intelligent, creative new ways to do off-chain validation. So EigenLayer, for the ZK app builder, will bring all of the assets. This is a screenshot from our app here if you go to app.eigenlayer.xyz. It'll bring the assets that folks might want to operationalize their service. It'll allow them to stake, any token, maybe native ETH if they prefer, or maybe a token that they might launch if that ZK developer says, I also want to launch a token. They could have multiple tokens staked into their service. And hundreds of highly qualified operators that want to run that service in exchange for rewards. So in some sense, EigenLayer can be a way to operationalize and add financial incentives behind the ZK app that would run on its own otherwise. And so EigenLayer at its own is really sort of a blank canvas. EigenLayer is the capital, the operators, and a protocol to use those for some on-chain validation of services. EigenLayer isn't a service on its own. It's not providing a service. But there's all these really interesting folks that have built these validation services in these apps, right? So if we can combine the two, we can come up with some very fun and interesting new services for the broader Web3 community. And hopefully EigenLayer can be an accelerant for that. Now, if you go to app.eigenlayer.xyz, you can check out our AVS tab, and you can see some of the AVSs that have launched live on mainnet. We've got folks like Brevis and Lagrange, which are doing ZK proving as a service, effectively. The proving mechanism happens with the operators in the service. You can bring your own circuit. You can run it on these services. We've also got some fun use cases of ZK TLS integration. If you guys have been following ELIZA OS, which is a popular agentic framework for crypto and AI, we have a fun plugin that we've built there where when the AI performs its inference, it actually uses opacity to validate that inference went through ChatGPT as opposed to some unauthorized, some random person's GPT. There was an example of, I think it's AI XBT, might be missing the name, but basically it was a Twitter profile that was allegedly an agent, but there was some question that was a person involved, and so it can kind of be a mechanism to prove authenticity of off-chain inference. And so lastly, we very recently released our roadmap, our public roadmap for where we're going with EigenLayer. If you go to docs.eigenlayer.xyz, you can get a full copy of this roadmap and some commentary around there. But one thing in particular is this this interest we've had for a while, which is launching AVS's cross-chain. Building an AVS on EigenLayer today is really rooted in Ethereum L1 primarily for assets, but many customers want to run on Base or OP Mainnet, or in this case, Aztec, because there's a lot of benefits to running on these L2s. So we are investing heavily in extending our capability to L2s, take advantage of assets there. We also have some great partners like Authentic, which are sort of AVS as a service, quick start platforms built on top of EigenLayer, which will let you do that today. And if you guys are interested, I'm happy to connect you with those folks. So in summary, EigenLayer is an open protocol. You guys are building really the secret sauce. You know, whoever builds these new ZK validation techniques, whether they choose to launch an AVS, or if someone else comes along and says, hey, like I found out there's a new ZK validation technique and they use that as launching part of their AVS, it's all positive sum. It's really a big unlock for what you guys are doing in the ZK space to enable more trustless off-chain services. So if you guys are interested in learning more about EigenLayer, we do have a quick start guide, a simple to use Hello World AVS, which is a great starting point. We have our docs here, which will get you right into building your own AVS. You can also reach out to us if you want to have a conversation about an idea you have for building a service, and you can join our community on Telegram. So that is all that I had, but thank you guys so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Wes. I just took over as MC, so I didn't get to hype you up enough. Wes was previously at Protocol Labs, Google Cloud. He did Ethereum proof of work mining, and you're driving AVS builder adoption at EigenLayer now. I wanted to ask you a quick question before I open it up to everyone else. What's a killer app that you would want to see with Noir and with AVS?
Ooh, that's a great question. Let's see. You know, I would actually love to see the Git Claim app. I saw someone had written that on Awesome Noir, just to validate what's going on with a GitHub profile, because a lot of folks, like, that becomes a big issue for like community building, who actually contributed code. And we don't have really great solutions for that yet, but if there was a way to launch something like Git Claim amongst a group of trusted operators, and then they can go and log into GitHub and they could pull the data, run a ZK proof to somehow validate that the contributions to a GitHub repo were legitimate, I just think there could be a lot of usage in the crypto community, like verifying contributions. Yeah.
Awesome. If anyone else has questions, if we can hand out the mic. If not, I can ask another one.
That's okay? Yeah, either way.
Maybe you could go a little bit into implementation on the AVS side with Git Claim specifically, just high level.
Yes, absolutely. Let me just see if I can pull up a visual here. Great. This is a view of what an AVS looks like more mechanically, which I think would be a good example for Git Claim. You know, EigenLayer at its most basic is a contract on Ethereum. That the person implements, implements some interfaces, and it connects to the core EigenLayer contracts. Those core EigenLayer contracts have all the staking assets, all the operators registered there. And so if I was going to implement something like Git Claim, I'd implement a new AVS contract, and I would have these operators run some code. I mean, the goal of these operators, it's very flexible, but very often they're all running the same code. They don't have to be experts in what's going on. They just want to get a Docker compose component, Docker package or Kubernetes or something they can just run effectively, and as long as they're running it, they're happy, they're participating. So I'd probably wrap Git Claim in some sort of a binary that these operators could run off chain, and then when I had a new request come in for validating some contribution to the GitHub repo, maybe that would come in on chain. Someone would submit a transaction, say, hey, I have a new series of contributions that I want to confirm. The operators would listen to that. They would hear that new task come on chain to the AVS contract, and then they would go and perform that operation using git claim. They would have the ZK proof as a result, and then they would write that proof back on chain. That would be some evidence that they did their work. They would get rewarded accordingly, and the end user would then get the results back as well from that GitHub contribution. So they would have some information about it, and it would be a more trustless way to get that information versus what we have today.
How would you retain privacy if you implement it in that way? And how do you see EigenLayer working alongside? So I see like there's many different ways you could use client-side stuff. You can use private blockchains, open blockchains, EigenLayer. Where do you see EigenLayer in this ecosystem for solutions like this, especially where you're caring about privacy, trying to retain like this information in Git claims case?
Yes, no, that is the $1 million question, because these operators here are really operating in a trustless context. They're operating on their own on the internet, and so I think in order to maintain privacy, we have to get a little more sophisticated about the data sets that they're operating on. We may need to use some encryption techniques like threshold encryption techniques. A lot of folks will use that, or time-based time lock encryption techniques, so that only the given operator can view the data to operate on it. There's also folks that use technologies like fully homomorphic encryption, or like trusted execution environments, different ways to make the data more difficult to get access to. I think because this is operating in the public, we have a little bit more work to do to ensure privacy in these use cases. Yeah. Good question.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions? Sure, let me not fall over.
Thank you. Just a quick question regarding the crypto economic security. As far as I know, currently on EigenLayer, like the protocol doesn't impose a certain limitation as to how many different AVSs the same digital asset can be restaked to as economic security. Are there any plans, I don't know, to implement that, or are there any measures? I mean, it may not be you may not be the best suited person regarding that, but I'm really curious about that, because I've recently been on your dashboard, and I did notice that the total TVS on EigenLayer and the total TVS, when I sum up the total TVL on EigenLayer and the total TVL of the individual AVSs summed up, is actually significantly different. So you see that there is an overcommitment to different AVSs of the same USD value. So how does that look like, or from a security perspective, or like future directions?
Yes,
something like that.
That's an excellent topic. No, thank you for bringing that up. We're in a bit of a funny transition where currently on mainnet of EigenLayer, slashing is not yet live. It's the last final piece of our protocol to be complete. Slashing is actually live on testnet currently, and it's our biggest focus to launch probably April, May-ish, approximately, without any commitments, firm commitments, but it's our number one focus for the engineering team. And so prior to slashing, you're exactly right. I could take $1,000 worth of ETH and I could commit it to as many AVSs as I wanted. And for reward's sake, that has some functionality, because certain services, they may simply want operators that have a certain amount of stake available to them to show that they're legitimate or that they're helpful or useful, and they can pay rewards. But getting into the more interesting use cases that require slashing as well, going forward with the slashing release, the dynamics are going to change a little bit, so that those operators, in order to opt in to slashable AVSs, they have what we refer to as unique stake. They can only allocate a certain amount of unique stake into each individual AVS. So there will no longer be that sharing nuance that you described as it is today. So effectively, the AVS operators will have a limited amount of stake. They can only give it to certain services. Now, at the same time, some services may say, I want you to allocate $1,000 worth of ETH to me, so that I may slash that 1,000 ETH. But also, in order to ensure legitimacy of you as an operator, I want to make sure that in general, you have over 100,000 stake total. So there's this unique stake, and there's this total allocated stake as well. And AVS service developers can choose how they want to balance those to ensure the right amount of trustlessness that they need for their service. So there'll be a little bit of both going forward. Yeah.
Great question. Great question. Any more questions? Cool. All right. We'll wrap up. Thank you for a great talk.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Cheers.